It's time now for the KC Ingram Show on WSTU. The opinions expressed are those of the program host and guest and not necessarily those of WSTU. WSTU does not endorse products that may be mentioned. Any reproduction or retransmission of this broadcast is strictly prohibited without written consent of WSTU. It's time to call in with your questions and comments at 220-9788, 220-WSTU. And now, here's KC Ingram.
Tired of lines at the boat launch, sun damage, or not using your boat because of the hassle? Call Meridian Marina and Yacht Club because we do all the work so you can enjoy your boating lifestyle. We store your boat inside, launch it with a wash with just 30 minutes notice, and rinse it down before putting it back. Need new electronics, service, detailing, bottom paint? No problem. Our experienced certified techs will make sure your boat is in tip-top shape and ready to head to the sandbar, fishing, or the Bahamas. Call us up at 772-221-8198. That's 221-8198, or visit us online at meridianmarina.com. Well, folks, this is the last show of the year. I go on hiatus here in the month of December, so we have a special double header this evening. We have Barbara Cloudis here in the studio from Martin County Currents, and she's going to update us on the Lake Point case. We haven't heard anything in quite a while, and there has been a lot happening, and that will be happening. And then at 5:30, tune right back in. We're going to have Commissioner Bob Solari join us by phone. He's on the other side of the state this evening, but he is going to update us on the Brightline, All Aboard Florida, Virgin Trains, whatever name they're using. The most current updates with that is Indian River County are continuing the fight, and we'll talk a little bit about Martin County that had agreed to the settlement this past weekend. But before we do that, I have on the line with us John Snyder from Treasure Coast Classical Academy, and he has a quick announcement he'd like to make. How are you doing this evening, John?
Hey, doing great, Casey. Thanks. Appreciate you letting us jump on for a moment to just share some exciting news. Treasure Coast Classical Academy is a tuition-free Hillsdale-affiliated charter school that's opening here in Martin County, just off Cove Road in August of 2019. And this week, on Friday, November 30th, at 12 o'clock, we're going to be doing a parent information meeting where folks can come out, learn more about TCCA, learn more about classical education. And that'll be happening again Friday at noon at the Port Salerno Boys and Girls Club. And then also again, 6 o'clock Friday this week at the Stewart Police Department there in their community room.
Wonderful. So that's two opportunities for parents to get out, find a little bit more about Treasure Coast Classical Academy. It's a very exciting charter school coming here to Martin County. John, if they want to find out more or if they need to sign up for these sessions, where do they go?
Absolutely, Casey. That's treasurecoastclassical.org. And then there's a link right there. They can see the upcoming meetings. So again, that's www.treasurecoastclassical.org. And then they can also find us on Facebook by searching Treasure Coast Classical Academy.
And do they need to sign up for these sessions, or can they just show up?
We would prefer an RSVP, and they can, again, do that at treasurecoastclassical.org/meetings.
John Snyder, thank you so much for tuning in, folks. This is a really exciting time here for Martin County. We're going to have a great charter school that's opening next fall, and they're going to admit students by lottery. And already there's been a lot that have submitted applications. So if you have interest, make sure you get out to these meetings here on the 30th. Again, treasurecoastclassical.org. So now we're going to move over to Barbara Cloudis. She is the publisher of Martin County Currents. Great newspaper here in the area that really, Barbara, I say that you're one of the few that really keeps track of what's happening here in the county, especially through the commission. There's so many different, as you were saying, lawsuits that have been going on, and people just aren't aware of them. As a matter of fact, I was speaking with somebody today, and she said Lake Point, and I haven't heard of it. So let's start out, Barbara. Tell us a little bit about the Lake Point lawsuit, and we're going to go in timeline here. What's happened with Maggie Herchella, Commissioners Fielding and Scott, and then, of course, Commissioner Hurd. So,
actually, Casey, there is no Lake Point lawsuit. It's over. The Lake Point case is done. It's over. That happened when the county settled and the South Florida Water Management District settled. What's going on in court now is that Maggie Herchala was also sued by Lake Point. It was a jury trial. The jury found her liable, and they awarded every dollar that a forensic accountant had said Lake Point had lost as a result of Herchala's actions. So that was $4.4 million that they awarded.
It's incredible.
She took that case, and essentially she now has sued Lake Point because she appealed that ruling by the jury, and it is before the 4th District Court of Appeal. There have been numerous efforts to sow disbelief and doubt about the validity of the whole proceedings, and over a dozen different organizations have filed what they call amicus briefs. They have one attorney representing the Guardians of Martin County, and they are providing information that they think is relevant to the case, and the court, which is 3 judges, appellate judges, can take that information under consideration. The First Amendment Foundation has filed an amicus brief. It's an amicus curiae brief, friend of the court brief.
Okay.
And that is focused primarily on the rights of free speech. That is what her case is based on as far as her attorneys. Now, she's got some heavyweight attorneys that came to her, I'm sure, because they were all affiliated, associated with, worked for her sister, Janet Reno, at the time that her sister was Attorney General.
Okay.
One of those attorneys is in the same law firm as Robert Mueller in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
So these are not
real heavyweights. They truly are.
they are truly the absolute best. So right now, Lake Point was granted extra time to answer all of these briefs. There were 4, essentially, because the Everglades Law Center attorney Richard Grosso prepared 2 or 3 of them himself, but each one kind of, they overlap a little, but they have different viewpoints. So Lake Point was granted additional time to answer those briefs. That was this week.
So just to be clear, it's a lot of information here. So the groups like the Guardians of Martin County, you said, the Everglades Foundation, and you mentioned 2 others, they all have submitted
friend of the court briefs
that Lake Point needs to answer, in addition to probably Maggie Herchala's attorneys.
Well,
I would imagine they have briefs as well.
All of that, they will take all of that into consideration.
Okay.
And we still don't, it's interesting because the case depends upon the jury's instructions that were given to them by the judge.
Okay.
Locally, her local attorney is Virginia Sherlock, and she argued at the time that the jury instructions were unfair.
Okay.
And that they used that as the basis for finding guilt.
Okay.
And she also charged that the judge was biased. Without giving my own opinion, unless you're there watching it, you wouldn't have seen bias by anybody except the defense attorney.
Okay.
And in my opinion,
mm-hmm.
And the same with the jury's instructions. But reading them is, that's a 2-page document.
Okay. Barbara, there's folks that don't even know what Lake Point is. Let's step back and just tell us, what is this all about? What is Lake Point?
Well, let's do it this way. Let's do an analogy. Right now, what's in court in Martin County is in criminal court. You have criminal charges that were levied against 3 commissioners, Sarah Hurd, Ed Fielding, and Ann Scott. Those are public records. If you, as an analogy, if you looked at the article about the Florida Oceanographic Society's expansion, it's ambitious, it's exciting, it has potential to take them up to the next level, attract statewide attention, become a major attraction. But that is on county-owned land. And what if somebody said, wait a second, that's not good for the environment. You should not be doing that. And then all of a sudden, the county started looking at, the county commissioners started saying, we need you to start paying market rate for your lease.
And that was to Lake Point.
No.
No.
We're talking
about Florida
hypothetical
okay.
right now.
Okay.
And suppose that was Jackie Thurlow Lippisch, who was complaining about the Oceanographic Society. And Mark Perry said, wait a second, why in the world? I've been here for years. I have a lease. I have a contract. Why are they starting to change things now? And then Mark Perry files a public records request to see what the correspondence is between Jackie and the commissioners. But he doesn't get those records. Those emails are not provided to him. Then he finds out that one of the commissioners, Sarah Hurd, conducted public business with her private email account. So he asks for all of the emails from the private, your personal computers. And they still don't get it. So you can empathize if Florida Oceanographic Society filed a suit to get those emails. That's the situation Lake Point was in.
Okay.
Lake Point had an agreement with the South Florida Water Management District. South Florida Water Management District had an agreement with Martin County concerning Lake Point. And that if Lake Point, which had purchased an equestrian development, housing development, with the intent to turn that into a water restoration project to move water out of the C-44 canal, clean it, and then send it south under the direction of the South Florida Water Management District. The South Florida Water Management District would have controlled the project, and they would have had to have applied for permits because there is no actual physical connection to the LA Canal. But Lake Point followed all of the rules, and this change in attitude occurred towards Lake Point after Lake Point started looking for markets to pay a fee for them cleaning that water.
They wanted to sell the water, so that's where...
It wasn't actually selling the water because you can't sell water. It's a public resource. But they were going to clean the polluted water coming down the C-44. That would have taken about 10% of the discharges that were coming through the St. Lucie estuary, going out to sea.
Which we want.
They made the investment to purchase the property, which was $48 million. They added another $1.5 million to build a pilot project to see if it would work. And it worked remarkably well. And then they had to find a market to see if they would be willing, if the end users would be willing to pay per gallon to use that water. This happened at the same time that we had a drought in 2010 and 2011. It made it very economically feasible to do it. And it was something South Florida Water Management District wanted them to do, because they're also responsible not only for controlling flooding, but providing water, drinking water, irrigation water.
Right.
They control the water.
Right. Barbara, we're going to be running out of time, and I want to make sure we get the updates on the cases themselves.
Okay.
Maggie, you gave us a good update. Where does Commissioner Scott and Fielding's cases stand?
They won't be heard until April. They've been continued to April.
Okay.
Commissioner Hurd is her case has been set for January 14th, but she also has filed to have the case dismissed. They are arguing that in order for her to have violated a criminal statute, that Lake Point would have to prove, not Lake Point, that the state attorney's office would have to prove that she willfully and knowingly lost those emails that she says were hacked from her computer, her personal computer. That willful intent, she says, means they don't have the proof of that, and she has never admitted that she did anything willfully or knowingly. And that has to be either heard first, or they will hear it at the beginning before the jury comes in at the trial.
I would venture to guess that her case is probably the most interesting, because she ran again and was reelected. So she is the only sitting commissioner now, where Commissioner Field did not decide to run again, and Commissioner Scott lost to now Commissioner Harold Jenkins.
That's right.
So, give us a scenario here. How would this affect her ability to still be a commissioner? When this case is heard, it's either going to be a guilty or not guilty. Obviously not guilty. We all can figure out what happens there all as well. And she was proven that what she had said was accurate. But if she's proven guilty, then what happens?
Well, they have not filed anything more than a misdemeanor. She doesn't have a case no history, no criminal history.
Right.
The most would be probably a fine. It's unlikely that she's going to be sent to jail, although she could. She could be removed from office. That is not set in stone. That's up to the governor.
Okay, so the governor would decide if it's egregious enough to remove a commissioner from office, basically. So this is a lot of information that's going to be coming up here at the beginning of the year. And, I want to make sure folks know that Martin County Currents, you really have kept up on these court cases better than anybody. And I really am excited that you came in here today to kind of give us the update and let us know what was happening. Maggie Herchella's case, you said that's on the appeal. And when did you say that'll be heard again?
There's no date.
No date yet. So they're just going through all the
preliminary.
Okay. So a lot to watch here yet.
Yes.
There truly is. And Lake Point, again, I know I cut you off a little bit because I wanted to make sure we had the update on the cases. But they asked for those emails between these commissioners and Maggie Herchella and basically did not get them all. And that's what this is all centered around.
They, even after Lake Point filed suit a year later, they did not get them until May of 2014. And they did not get all of them. And if you'll remember, there was a civil trial, and Judge McManus found them not guilty at first.
That's right. And then it came back to trial, and there was some pretty stern words about what was going on with the computers and the emails and the hacking.
And what he did was he just took them at their word, and then discovered that there were secret email accounts that had not been revealed. So he overthrew his verdict, and the case went back to court.
So, Barbara, I'm sure there's going to be more articles coming out at Martin County Currents. Where can people find your paper, and how often is it published?
Well, it's published when I get enough advertising to cover the cost.
There you go.
So if anybody wants to make sure that there's an issue, just let me know. And it is in all the libraries, all the chambers, lots of businesses. And of course, there's some in his lobby now.
Right here at WSTU. And also online, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Online as well. Yes.
Yeah, so anybody can go ahead and download your
Subscribe.
paper and subscribe. And again, that's Martin County Currents. Barbara Cloudis, appreciate you coming in and giving us a quick, I think we could have a whole hour on this, but I'll have to have you back.
Easily.
All right.
Easily. I know, and it's a very complex case, but
Yes,
it is ongoing, and we're going to keep watching it here next year and see what unfolds.
All right.
So stay tuned. After the mid-hour break, we're going to have Bob Solari, Commissioner Bob Solari, on from Indian River County, and he is going to update us on All Aboard Florida, Brightline, Virgin Trains, however,
Whatever
whoever
it's called
it is.
today.
Yes.
Yes.
Stay tuned.
All right. Today's Southeast AgNet Report is brought to you by Everglades Farm Equipment, a family-owned business for the past 50 years with 10 Florida locations, including Fort Pierce, Okeechobee, and Loxahatchee. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. You're listening to the KC Ingram Show with KC Ingram, and now here she is.
Appreciate you all joining us again for a very special edition this evening. It is the last show of 2018 for the KC Ingram Show.
Wow.
So incredible. I know
It's been a fast year.
It's been a really fast year, and so much has happened besides the elections, and we visited with so many people. So
We have.
It's really something. We're going to finish out the show with Commissioner Bob Solari from Indian River County, and he's going to give us the latest updates on the fight against the train, because it is still going strong in Indian River County. And I think it's wonderful. And we're going to be doing a lot more train shows at the beginning of the year. As a matter of fact, when we come back on the air on January 9th, we're going to have Paul Laura going to be talking about the LNG transport down the lines of the FECR, the freight division. So that'll be the kickoff show of the year. But for right now, Commissioner Bob Solari, are you on the line with me?
I am, Casey. How are you tonight?
I am so good. Commissioner Solari, thank you for so many things. First of all, for being here on air, but more importantly, my goodness, Indian River County is continuing the fight. You guys are in this. You know this is not a done deal. And for many residents here in Martin County, we are so grateful because, we had some very disappointing news over the weekend from our own county commission that has agreed to settle a lawsuit, but the contingencies of that settlement we'll go into in a little bit are far too costly than just moving on with the lawsuit, in my opinion. So, Commissioner Solari, you went through this very same meeting with Indian River County commissioners deciding whether or not you were going to accept this lawsuit with Brightline, All Aboard Florida, Virgin, whatever it is these days. Why did you guys not settle?
Well, each one of us probably had different reasons. I had no desire to settle at all because from the very start, I realized that this project was first doomed to fail financially. Second, had real safety concerns. And then when you got to the specifics of the agreement itself, it had one paragraph which basically would have tied our hands going forward with anything related to All Aboard Florida, not just those things that were in the settlement, but anything else that came up. One of the things that has happened recently, and I'll talk more about it later, is the OPAGA study. And that study made clear that there were real safety concerns with All Aboard Florida, and the state had things in their power to do about the safety. And we believe that certain rail legislation is necessary, but we couldn't have gone up as a commission and tried to convince our legislators that that was a good thing based on this agreement. So in the end, when I got elected and sworn into office, I basically swore to represent the people of Indian River County and uphold their health, safety, and welfare. And I couldn't sign that agreement and maintain my oath.
Commissioner Solari, you're absolutely right. It was one of the most things I was very disappointed about with my county commission, because they are elected to represent their constituents, the people of Martin County. And this settlement agreement, to me, is one of the most unfair settlement agreements to the people of Martin County, because it does tie our commissioner's hands. And for a long time, it's through the build out in up to a period in certain respects of 5 years beyond. And, lobbying for safety regulations are so incredibly important. We do not know what's coming down the line with All Aboard Florida, how it will completely impact the area until it's here. And if there are impacts that they need to lobby for, our commissioners can't say anything. They have basically signed away their right to represent their constituents on this issue.
Yeah, from this point on, they're basically spectators, and I certainly didn't want Indian River County commissioners to be spectators in this very important thing for the people of Indian River County.
What do you see here in the near future with, Brightline or Virgin Trains, whatever it is? And can update some folks here. They have not sold the private activity bonds necessary to build out the northern portion. So the latest scramble for financing is it looks like they're going to try to issue some IPOs.
I briefly read through some of the IPO offering. It looks like they're going to try to raise about $100 million. That will not be enough to do much for them. They need to raise at least $1.1 billion. So I'm not sure. And again, I don't know if anybody outside of Virgin and Brightline knows what exactly they're trying to accomplish in the short term with this Virgin deal and with the IPO. I certainly don't know it. I'm not going to pretend.
Right.
But one of the interesting things looking at the IPO was the series of companies involved on both the Virgin side and the Fortress All Aboard Florida side. I couldn't tell you who owns what anymore. And I doubt people who buy the bonds, if they ever buy the bonds, could tell you who owns what. And it's just becoming one of those more convoluted, lawyer-driven activities that I've seen in a while.
This whole thing has become convoluted. If I go back, to 2014, it was owned by Fortress, out of a hedge fund out of New York City, where now Fortress was purchased by SoftBank, a Japanese company, but Florida East Coast Railway, the freight division, has been purchased by Grupo Mexico, and All Aboard Florida falls under the SoftBank side. So you have two foreign countries basically, running this line now. And now you have All Aboard Florida that doesn't own the tracks, trying to continue on and issuing these IPOs.
And you have Virgin now, so now it's three countries outside the United States that are pulling at All Aboard Florida, and nobody knows what direction it's going to go. It's really incredible.
It is incredible. And let's talk about Virgin here for a second, because of course that's Richard Branson, Virgin Airlines, but he also had a company called Virgin Trains East Coast in the UK.
And I think that just went through a big bailout, didn't it?
It sure did, a taxpayer bailout. But you know what? He also started out saying it was going to be privately funded. And, he said, well, that 3.3 billion pound bid was based on a number of key assumptions which have not materialized. Boy, does that sound familiar.
It does. But again, if you know that the end game is going to be a federal bailout, you want somebody with bailout experience like Mr. Branson.
Absolutely. He knows how to get it done, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
He does. And I will also state, folks, Orlando Sentinel stated that he is a minority investor. So everybody's like, oh, Richard Branson's just going to throw all this money in it. They quoted him as being a minority investor. So
yeah, I don't see anything more than a licensing agreement. To me, it's like Trump. Before Trump became president, he basically licensed his name. And people would throw a lot of money at him to put Trump on different buildings. And that seems to be what's happening here. All Aboard Florida is basically giving up equity, evidently, to be able to say Virgin rather than Brightline.
Or All Aboard Florida.
It just seems to me to be a very, very risky and sort of Hail Mary path on the part of All Aboard Florida.
It certainly is. Let's talk a little bit here again about those concessions, folks. You can find them on floridanotallaboard.net. If you go under the news, you will see the settlement agreement and you can read it for yourself. But, Martin shall not seek to impose any county or local approval or permitting requirements with respect to work currently proposed and done within the FECR right away. The more egregious part, though, is what you were talking about. And that was that they could not, during the period of construction in the first 3 years of Brightline passenger revenue operations between West Palm and Orlando, Martin, and also Care Florida, couldn't pass any resolution or adopt any other official act that publicly supports or actively encourages third parties to support any federal or state legislation or new county laws or regulations that would directly and adversely impact the Brightline project. That is something I wanted my elected officials to absolutely be involved in and lobby for us, the constituents. And the settlement does not allow them to do that. So, Bob, can you talk a little bit about what Debbie Mayfield is proposing?
Well, I believe Debbie is going to be proposing legislation. First of all, she was the driver of getting the OPAGA study. And the OPAGA study is basically a study done through the Florida legislature. And I think that was very, very, very important. It showed a number of things, including the weakness of Brightline's finances, the failure of Brightline to provide the type of safety that they should, and the fact that, very importantly, that the Florida Department of Transportation, which has for 5 years been sitting on the sidelines, does have a very important part to play in this. So I believe that she's going to be once again proposing legislation which will help get the type of safety requirements we need, and that will hopefully get FDOT, Florida Department of Transportation, engaged in the process.
It seems it doesn't even seem possible that our state cannot weigh in or doesn't have better safety regulations, especially in light of all the deaths that have happened already in the South counties.
Well, importantly, the OPAGA study points out that it does have a role to play, that the FRA doesn't do anything for what the OPAGA study says is higher speed rail as opposed to high speed rail. High speed rail being trains that travel above 125 miles an hour, and higher speed rail being trained like all aboard Florida that are traveling between 80 and 125 miles per hour. It very specifically states that the Florida Department of Transportation does have a role to play in that gap, and it ought to get involved, not only in making sure that the right safety things are done, but also it talks about best management practices in other areas of the country with their rail, and that these best management practices in states like, I believe, California and Illinois ought to be implemented in Florida. So it's very important that way and very meaningful. And, of course, you mentioned the deaths.
Yes.
So the Apopka study also noted that in Florida, the death rate is 3.5 times higher than the national average.
Wow.
For the miles, deaths per mile traveled. And I think that was before the most recent deaths that have occurred on Brightline.
It's incredible. And let me read off, I have to do this, the settlement, some of the commitments that Martin County had to make. Martin County agrees that it will not oppose or challenge or encourage others to oppose or challenge any pending or future federal, state, or local approval, permit, or authorization relating to the Brightline project or the financing of the Brightline project, or seek any further state, federal, or local environmental or other governmental review with respect to the improvements that Brightline is committing to make in this agreement during the period of construction and the first 5 years of Brightline passenger revenue between West Palm and Orlando. That is a huge concession, in my opinion. We're just talking about all these safety improvements and deaths, and my county has their hands tied.
Yeah, and that was something that I made clear on the dais on Tuesday night, that I certainly couldn't sign something like that. And I didn't believe any member of our county commission could agree to something like that because it was so egregious.
It is, Commissioner Solari, and here to you and your fellow commissioners that voted against settling that. As a constituent, I look up to you, my commissioners, and I'm so grateful that somebody like you is out there to protect our health, safety, and welfare. So that was really important. And Bob, Frank's telling me I got to take a real quick break here, but we're going to come back here in about 3 minutes. Don't. Stay on the line for me.
And now back to KC Ingram.
And I'm on the line with Commissioner Bob Solari, our hero from Indian River County. Bob, you had a chance to look at this contract. One thing I have a question for you is there was a little caveat in there that said they'll put, they're going to put a depot on the Treasure Coast. And it may have not been in Indian River County, but they're talking about Fort Pierce or Stewart. But the interesting part was they'll pay for 50%. We have to pay the other 50%. And, I looked up, I found that the depot in West Palm Beach and the depot in Fort Lauderdale, their engineers, TLC Engineering for All Aboard Florida, said each of those stations cost $18 million. Now, I can't imagine they're going to build that big of a station up here, but you know what? Do we know what 50% is? It's probably going to be more than a lawsuit. I don't know.
I have no idea what 50% is going to be, nor do I believe any of the commissioners up and down the Treasure Coast have any idea what that's going to be.
But yet we agreed to it. We'll pay 50%.
Well, that's only if you get it, and you
Yeah.
can always refuse it, so you don't have to pay it. But,
Right.
I mean, the whole thing was a red herring anyway.
Yes.
There's, it also says that it's going to run 2 trains in each direction each day. And if you actually look at that, that means you'll have one opportunity to go north and one opportunity to go south, and then to come back each day. So if you're going to go from, say, we'll say that just for imagining that the station was in Vero Beach, and you wanted to go shopping in Miami. Well, you'd have to get the 8 o'clock train, say, and if the last train, or the only train back, was at 6 in the evening, you had to be sure that you were at the station by 5 to 6, or you'd be looking for a hotel. So clearly anybody who works in either place up and down the line would not live in Vero and risk getting to work and getting home on the one available train.
And let's hope they don't
realize that.
That's right. And I was going to say, let's hope they don't cancel the train as they have already done in the southern portion and left people stranded, at the depot. So just throwing that out there. What did you feel this settlement had teeth? I mean, what is in it, Bob, that would make Virgin, Brightline, whatever they are, actually follow through with the promises they made in this settlement?
Well, I don't know how the counties intend to enforce the settlement. I guess they'd have to have another lawsuit. But I think that Virgin would try to get the safety stuff in place. I think in time they're going to be required to get it in place anyway. Once that gets involved and once the FRA starts counting up these deaths, they're going to require some of the additional safety pieces that are in the settlement agreement. But who knows how any of this is going to be enforced. And actually, I don't believe that Brightline is going to be around in 5 years.
I don't either.
I don't think anything's going to be enforced.
I agree. The only thing that they were very successful in is quieting the Martin County Commission. So they no longer can represent the residents on this issue. So, and that's a real shame and very disappointing. Another issue I want to talk about that's more Martin County related was the bridge. We have the bridge here in Stewart. It's going to remain single tracked, and they put a little caveat in there that said, they will raise the bridge if they can get 35% more boat traffic under the bridge. Well, it turns out they're really not raising the bridge. They're actually, I may not be technically calling them correctly, but the beams under the bridge, instead of them being wider, they can put narrower beams, so you can get more clearance under the bridge. And that's, they said that's only if they get 35% more boat traffic. Well, for all the boaters out there, do you really think even if we get another foot, let's say, of clearance, that we're going to actually get 35% more boat traffic? That bridge is already so low, very few boats can get under it. So that was another disappointment. And myself personally, I feel like our county commission left everybody that's west of that bridge out in the cold. And we had absolutely no concessions that were west of that bridge. And there's a lot of marinas and waterfront homes that were depending on being able to have ocean access. And now All Aboard Florida is telling us 15 minutes out of the hour, the bridge will be open. And it's a very narrow passage. There's a lot of current there, and it's a recipe for disaster. But our commission won't be able to say anything about it because that's what they agreed to.
I'm just wondering if they're going to count the boating death as Brightline death.
Right.
Or if that's going to be a separate category.
Right. Depends who's reporting it, right?
I guess that's true. true.
So what's on the horizon for Indian River County? Again, thank you, Indian River County. Many residents here in Martin County completely support you. We wish our county still supported you as well. You are our brethren in this fight from the very beginning. And what's next on the horizon?
Well, we will be working for legislation, and then we'll importantly be trying to get the people in the Treasure Coast area to understand more about the Opaga study, what it says about safety, for instance, what it says about FDOT's responsibility, and what it says about finances, because the more people who understand the reality of this situation, I believe the more people who will be against the rail project and against it forcefully. So those things are important. And importantly, while you have taken your county commission to task, the people in Martin County are still very supportive of the efforts to fight this train. And the people in Indian River County are also very, very strong.
Yes.
So going forward, we'll be working to maintain and even build the grassroots movement against All Aboard Florida by making sure that everybody has the most recent information available, so that they understand what the actual prospects of All Aboard Florida are, and that they have a voice. At times like this, when you have the vote that Martin County Commission took, it may feel like your voice is gone, but different people in the state hear you. So we need people to understand that this is an ongoing fight, that if you look at the progress they've made, again, a little history. This project, the first press release I saw about this was in 2012, and All Aboard Florida said they would be running these trains by 2014, that it was going to cost $1 billion. Well, here it is, 2018, the end of 2018, and the earliest it could be running from Miami to Orlando is 2022, and the new cost in the Opaga study is $4.3 billion. So they haven't made much progress. They've been up to basically Fort Lauderdale for a couple, 3 years now, it seems, but they haven't gotten a foot beyond that.
And let's not forget that they have lost over $56 million in the 2 first quarters of this year running between West Palm and Miami.
And again, what's $56 million when your price tag has gone up by $4 billion?
Exactly.
It's incredible. And there's nothing about the Virgin deal, which is going to help them too much. There's nothing about anything that's going to help them too much. The ridership, the ridership study numbers have been really bogus for a while, but the 2017 Berger study said that they were going to have, All Aboard Florida was going to have 1 million customers in 2018. The Opaga study now says it's going to be 360,000. This is not success.
It is not success whatsoever. And Commissioner Solari, to your end about the grassroots movement, folks, Florida Not All Aboard is on Facebook. Florida All Aboard is on the web, floridanotallaboard.net. We are going to be having a major announcement about just the thing that you said. We do still have a voice, and Florida Not All Aboard is going to have an announcement where we are going to reach out and hear from you. We do want to hear from you. Community, it's time to get together. It's time for all of us to speak up, and we're going to have an announcement here real soon. So be watching those pages, and you'll be seeing that forthcoming here in the next week or so. So the other thing I want to touch base on, Commissioner Solari, is, again, and I'm reiterating what you've said, they have been scrambling for financing from the very start, from day one. They first wanted to get that RIF loan, if you remember, and that was only $1.5 billion. As it turns out, that wouldn't have been enough either. They didn't get that, so they've tried these private activity bonds. They haven't been able to sell those, so now they're trying IPOs. Folks, this company, I've never seen anything like this, where they're trying to roll out a project and they never had financing in place.
That is all true, and there's nothing that's happened that indicates that they will get the type of financing they need.
There isn't, and you're absolutely right. They were supposed to be up and running in 2014, folks. So if you think our efforts are that it's not working, it absolutely is. We're heading into 2019, and frankly, there's still no Treasure Coast going through Vero Beach, is there, Bob?
There, I haven't seen it.
We haven't either. So let's continue the fight. Florida Not All Aboard. Watch out for the big announcement coming, because we do want to hear your voice, and we are going to support and do everything we can with Indian River County, because this is not a done deal.
It certainly isn't, and I look forward to continuing continuing the fight with you, Casey.
I do as well, Commissioner Solari. Thank you. Have a good evening. Appreciate you checking in with us. Again,
pleasure. Take care.
You too. Thank you. And folks, again, this is the last show of this year, but join me on January 9th. I'll be back in the studio. We're going to be talking about LNG on the tracks. So we'll come back and I will see you next year. Enjoy the holidays.